Can you read this? Reading is helpful and assists learning. Now, you may be thinking that what I asked of you was pretty simple. And you might also be assuming that most fourth grade students would have no problem with this. But the scary truth is that for 2/3 of fourth grade students in America, this sentence is not simple. It's a challenge. Now consider this. 70% of American adults in prison cannot read at a fourth grade level. It is not a coincidence that these two facts are presented together. So why is it so likely that a fourth grade student may struggle to read this 6-word sentence? Why is there such a high rate of illiteracy in American prisons? And what if we could lower crime rates? Not with punishment, but with education. Hi, my name is Marissa Kazi, and today I will be talking about how low literacy rates in early years of American education can increase the likelihood of incarceration. Home and school environments can limit reading accessibility, causing early childhood literacy skills to weaken, motivating them to turn to alternate means of survival when they are unfit to meet the demands of the real world. At Glenelg High School, where we significantly exceed our division and state standard assessment scores for reading and writing, we are lucky to not have to worry about our literacy rates like many other schools do. Our scores are based on the standardized tests in Virginia, the Standards of Learning, or as many of you may know it by, the SOLs. SOLs are exclusive to Virginia, so a common measurement used across the nation is the National Assessment for Education Progress, also known as the NAEP. They provide data on reading scores nation and statewide using a scale with 3 tiers, the lowest being basic, then proficient, and the highest advanced. In 1992, the national average reading score was 217, 21 points below what is considered sufficient. 30 years later, we have seen no improvement. In fact, in 2024, it was even lower at 215. Clearly, America is and has been struggling with an alarming literacy crisis. And remember the statistic I mentioned earlier? The National Center for Education Statistics established that 70% of American adults in prison cannot read at a fourth grade level. The high illiteracy rates in U.S. prisons is the product of the cycle of inadequate education, poverty, and crime. What you may not know is that this cycle begins much earlier than you think. A common misconception is that middle, high school, and higher education has more of an impact than our elementary years. And while the influence of higher education is not to be overlooked, our 3rd and 4th grades are a vital turning point in our education. A University of Chicago study perfectly explains this turning point, stating that until the end of 3rd grade, students are learning to read. And in 4th grade, students begin reading to learn. So those students who are struggling to read proficient in 4th grade, and the NAEP found that this is almost 70% of 4th grade students in America, will have difficulty keeping up with the written material which becomes a central part of their future education. What makes this literacy crisis even more concerning is that these grade levels have a serious influence on students' futures. The English Standards of Learning issued by the Virginia Department of Education state that reading proficiently has a direct impact on high school graduation, and a student struggling to read on grade level in 3rd grade is 4 times more likely to drop out. Not only do literacy skills affect futures, but reading has a biological impact on children's brain development. Brain scans from a Cambridge University study show that reading positively affects learning, memory, speech development, and overall academic performance. And on the flip side, the research also shows that these readers suffer less depression, aggression, disengagement, anxiety, and have a lower tendency to misbehave. So if there is such a clear necessity for literacy retention, then why are the reading scores so low? Various environmental factors can negatively affect a child's education and literacy development. One that may seem obvious is poverty, but the true importance of poverty is frequently overlooked. At home, financial constraints force families to prioritize essentials like food or medical expenses over purchasing books, and this absence of books at home can have a lasting negative impact. In addition, lower education levels of parents most likely means lower income, hindering the child's learning. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York found in a study of workers aged 22 to 27 that earning a bachelor's degree increases their median income by almost $24,000. Reading is less encouraged and less available in low-income households, perpetuating illiteracy throughout generations. In the classroom, poverty-stricken schools lack the resources necessary to prepare their students. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer newspaper found that half of the children in poverty are entering school with a weaker vocabulary than their wealthier peers, and then not receiving the right help to fix it. Instead, teachers are focusing class time reinforcing test-taking strategies, when it could be dedicated to reading and writing. Without appropriate training, teachers are unable to pull students out of the rut of low literacy. But keep in mind that poverty does not automatically equal failure. For many students like Brandon Grigg, a college student who shared his personal experience overcoming violence, food scarcity, inadequate education, and more, and learned the value of academics. In his own TED Talk, he explained being stuck in the illiteracy to incarceration pipeline, but now has a 4.0 GPA at Jacksonville University. But for many others, without adequate help, poverty is too overwhelming. The consequences extend far beyond the classroom for students who miss the mark for reading and writing. Entering adulthood, academic underachievement grows into the inability to navigate the demands of the real world, motivating them to turn to alternatives of survival. A 2012 study by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, an organization dedicated to at-risk youth, found that children not reading proficiently by third grade account for about 63% of the students who fail to graduate high school. It starts by falling behind with children's books, to eventually falling behind with the challenging work given in high school. And there, they surrender to the desire to drop out. And according to the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, become almost 4 times more likely than graduates to be arrested. Without literacy skills, they lack the necessary skills to find a job. It hinders their ability to not only be qualified, but look for posting, fill out an application, make a resume, and more. And for those who do find a job, low literacy holds them back from career advancement or increased pay. And without school or a job, many of these individuals find themselves falling down a path of crime. So what can we do to prepare these students for a future out of handcuffs? In 2023, many states like Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Virginia, and Wisconsin adopted a new method of teaching called the science of reading. This method uses psychology and cognitive science to break down reading by their letters and their sounds. Dr. Kozlov, a professor of education at UNC Wilmington, explained how the science of reading works better than memorization, saying that if a child memorized 10 words, then the child can read 10 words. But if the child learns the sounds of 10 letters, then the child can read 353 sound words, 4,004 sound words, and 21,005 sound words. This model of teaching is essential to equip students with foundational reading skills. Proper funding is vital to ensure the same opportunities for every student, regardless of financial status. As a matter of fact, the Alliance for Excellent Education found that the nation could save $19.7 billion annually if the national high school graduation rate for males increased by only 5%. Now, where would all this money come from? The answer is American prison. Per year, the national average cost to educate a student is $12,000, while the average state cost to house an inmate is more than double that at $28,000. Similarly, a study in the Journal of Urban Economics found that incarceration before the age of 17 reduces the likelihood of graduating high school by 26%. While juvenile incarceration reduces the likelihood of graduating high school, supporting public education keeps these kids in school, combating illiteracy with early initiatives and resources, ensuring successful futures. Reading is helpful and assists learning. Think about that 4th grader out there who is struggling to read this sentence. Does this mean that they are doomed to a life of crime? No, but the U.S. is facing a widespread literacy crisis due to a lack of resources at home and in school, stifling literacy development in the early, crucial elementary years of education, feeding into a cycle of academic failure, unemployment, and incarceration. By emphasizing education and improving literacy with evidence-based methods, equitable funding, and adequate early education, we can save that at-risk 4th grader before their future is behind bars. Reading is helpful and assists learning. That 4th grade student's ability to read this 6-word sentence could mean the difference between a future in business suits or a future in an orange jumpsuit. Thank you.
That was so good. That was so good. Oh my God.